Hello, I'm Maria Hall Brown. Welcome to Protest and Promise, a program that allows young Angelenos to actually have a say and hear from experts in their world. It's a very changing world right now, but fortunately today we have someone who has wonderful perspective. We're delighted to be joined by Jorja Leap. She is from UCLA. She's a nationally recognized gang expert, but she also has incredible insight into youth development and violence crisis intervention. We're also delighted to be joined by our young panel today. This is a terrific group. We have Bridget. Hi, Bridget. Nice to see you. We have Marcus. Hi, Marcus. And we're delighted to welcome Sarai. The idea of gang expertise and also youth development, that's kind of an interesting combination. How do they correlate together, by the way?
Because so many kids who are attracted to gangs are youth, are young. And if they have an alternative, if they have a way to develop, they'll move away from gangs. So they're intertwined.
Okay, so this has been your life for a long, long time.
Yes.
Well, I know Marcus was really interested in getting to know you a little bit. So, Marcus?
Hello.
Hi.
Nice to meet you.
Nice to meet you.
Yeah. I would like to ask you, what influenced you to get involved with like social justice issues, specifically studying gangs?
When I was 10 years old, the Watts riots occurred right here in Los Angeles. And I was with my uncle, who was a history teacher, an LAUSD history teacher, and he explained to me why the riots were happening. They weren't about violence so much as they were about economics and police brutality. And I'm sad to say that that crisis is really what got me interested in the issue of social justice when I was 10 years old. And it marked me forever. Later, as I got involved with social work, one of the first areas I worked in was in child abuse. And I couldn't take it. It was so difficult to see what happened to children every day. And instead of working with children who had been abused, it was easier to work with gang members. Now, the strange part of all that is, I soon learned that many gang members had been abused. And that's why they sometimes sought protection from the gang. But I took a kind of twisting path. It wasn't a straight from A to B. And I think that's one of the reasons I became so deeply committed.
I'm just going to ask a question to all of you. How many of you are aware of the Watts riots, or the Watts uprising?
I am.
Okay. Bridget, are you aware of the Watts uprising?
Yes. I think it took place like 20 blocks, like south of me.
Oh, interesting. Interesting.
Or something.
Yeah. Sarai?
Yeah, because,
sorry.
I'm sad to say I actually did not know about it.
That's actually a good thing. So let's kind of readdress that, because there's so much that happened then that have parallels to what they're witnessing as young people now.
Right. The Watts riots took place in Watts, and Watts is actually a community in the city of Los Angeles. So it's just a neighborhood, a community. It's called Watts. And it has always been one of the poorest communities in the city of Los Angeles, and also a community that was long brutalized by the LAPD. And in 1965, I'm going to give you the really short version, a young black man was stopped, and there was a whole series of incidents that arose around his being stopped by the LAPD. His mother got involved, a crowd got involved, and a riot that lasted almost 7 days ensued, a riot or an uprising. The National Guard had to be brought in, and I'm really sad to say it wasn't the last time that this happened in Los Angeles, but it was the 1960s, and this was the beginning of a series of uprisings across the United States. It occurred in Newark, it occurred in Detroit, but the touchstone was Watts. And it changed the city of Los Angeles forever. What you guys should know is, after the Watts riots, there was a commission to study why they happened. And what this commission, I think it was the McCone Commission, found was that there is something called a spiral of despair. No schools, no jobs, no opportunities, police brutality, that all lit the fuse of this uprising.
Bridget, I know that you participated in a lot of the protests that recently happened. Do you find it interesting that there's this similarity, or do you recognize some of the same themes, and what prompted you to get involved?
What prompted me to get involved was how common it is in my area, specifically in South Central LA, like how it's like it's become the new normal, and I don't want it to be the new normal anymore. It's honestly terrifying to think that like one day it can happen, like near me or around me at any time, because that's the reality of it all.
So that personal relationship, I think, is a really interesting thing that I'm sure that you've witnessed in talking to all of these people that you've worked with over the years.
It's so difficult to talk with the gang members, the active gang members, the former gang members, their families, because of course they have a lot of contact with the police. That's frankly, along with other gang members, that's probably who they have the most contact with in the day-to-dayness of their world. And what upsets me is we're still talking about the same problems 55 years after the Watts rising, the Watts uprising or the Watts riots. And my concern is, why haven't things changed? Why was George Floyd murdered? Why did that happen? You should not be living in a world where that is happening. And Bridget, I'm happy to hear that you were involved in the demonstrations and marching. And the challenge for all of you is, what are we going to do to make real change happen? So that someday you're not sitting in front of young Angelenos saying, well, did you ever hear about this uprising? Or have you learned about George Floyd? And we're still talking about the same problem. I don't know, how do you guys feel about that?
I agree. I feel like a lot of the times, unfortunately, history has a way of repeating itself if we're not able to learn the lesson behind the situations that occur in our society. So I think that especially this new generation of Generation Z, I think that they have seen the patterns that have been happening in society. And I think that, protests have always been happening for years, but I hope that this time, this generation is able to kind of make change for good, so that, again, history doesn't keep repeating itself.
Yes.
You had an interesting question, Sarahi, about this whole issue of the gangs and the police that I know you wanted to ask.
Oh, yes. So I guess my question was, what do you feel that our current laws are missing when it comes to addressing gang violence? Because I feel like they're not getting what is actually causing it. So what is it that you think that they're getting wrong?
They're getting two things wrong. They take gang members who are young, a lot of the times under 18 years old, or between 18 and 20, which is young. And the response is punishment. And there's even something that's called a gang enhancement. Have you guys ever heard of what a gang enhancement is? Mm-mm. So a gang enhancement is an add-on. Not only are they accused of a crime, it's added on that they're suspected of being a gang member. And if they're found guilty, it means that their sentence goes on steroids, that they're sentenced to even more prison. So it's punishment and more punishment. What laws are doing wrong is that we are not offering community-based alternatives to locking people up. We need to have something called diversion. And there's already a project right in South LA called Sentinella Youth Services. And instead of going into the criminal justice system, youth, including gang members, go into diversion. They're still subjected to a lot of requirements, but they're not locked up. And we need more diversion. We need to go away from the idea of gang enhancements, because I got news for you. Sometimes they give a person a gang enhancement and they're not a member of a gang. And it is really scary to me. It could happen to one of you. Wrong place, wrong time, wrong clothes, wrong friends, boom, and you're labeled. So I think we've got to understand what happens to youth, what gangs are, go away from enhancements, go towards diversion. Our communities, the communities in South Los Angeles, are not going to be healed by outsiders. They're going to be healed by the people within the communities.
Do you all three feel close to your community? I mean, do you have emotional ties to your communities?
It's sort of 50-50. I feel close to the community. I wish the community to do well. I want everybody to succeed in the community. I don't want to see anybody hungry in the community. I want the community to do well and strive. So yeah, in a way, I do feel emotionally connected to the community. I want to see the community do as best as possible.
So what are you worried about in your world? What is it that prompted you to want to spend some time with us today and talk to Jorja?
I'd say just a lot of times it's a safety thing, because I see a lot of people late nights driving, and sometimes they get pulled over by the cops in like the dark. And I know a lot of things, like there's so many stories happening where people get pulled over and then it goes south. And I think maybe community ties should just, I wish the community come close. I don't know how to explain it, but I wish the tie between the community, the police, and community and gang members, I wish everybody could come together to some agreement and try to live a more peaceful life without as much edge to it, where you have to watch your back wherever you go, make sure you're not doing 5 over the limit so you don't get targeted by the cops or people look at you weird in sort of neighborhoods like that. So that's what I would.
There is good work going on in that regard.
There is, that really is what you just described is the definition of a community tie, first of all. And what Maria just said is so true. There is a new project, and it was put together by this incredible LAPD, believe it or not, she's a deputy chief now, Amada Tingarides. And it's called the Community Safety Partnership. Have the three of you, any of you heard of this?
Bridget, were you with us when we talked to Deputy Chief? Okay, yeah.
Amada's a trip. She's a deputy chief, but she was born and raised in Watts, and she is a Black woman who understood and saw and felt just what you're talking about, Marcus, the kind of hypervigilance, looking over your shoulder, being careful, full on. And she started this program where the community leads the way for public safety. Instead of the LAPD leading the way, it's the community. And they work together, but the community has to say, these are the problems, these are where we need you, oh, you're not doing so well here, and there has to be constant communication. Now, it's only started in a few places at a very, very small scale, but building communities is what we need. We don't need people to tear communities down. And in Los Angeles, all of you know, there are communities that from the outside, people don't understand. They label them. You say South Central, and it's like, ooh. I've had people say to me, what are people like there? And I say, you won't believe it. They're just like you, right? So there are tremendous communities, tremendous strengths, but we need to work on making more of those and to end that feeling of looking over your shoulder.
So Sarai, what are you worried about in your world? I mean, you are all experiencing an era in which defines definition, literally, defies definition because of the pandemic, because of the civil unrest, because of everything that you are facing as young people. Your lives got turned upside down in so many ways. So what are the things that concern you, and obviously the reason you wanted to speak with Jorja today?
I think the things that are concerning me, especially about my community, is just the repeating of patterns. Because I feel like a lot of the people in my community who didn't have the best or didn't come from the best environments are repeating the same patterns of the environment that they came from, because they're automatically maybe like stigmatized, or even I would go as far as to saying almost like villainized by society because they come from that environment. So, for example, like I know I had classmates back when I was still at the high school in my community who would, their parents didn't have time to go to do homework with them, and so they would do bad in school and get reprimanded for that, for not doing well in school. And so they felt like they didn't have anyone to believe in them. And then it became a self-fulfilling prophecy. They would indeed start flunking out of school, not finishing, and just repeating the same pattern over and over again.
Yeah, that is what keeps me up at night. How do we break that pattern and make sure it stays broken? Because the other thing we know is with patterns, sometimes people break them and then they relapse, for lack of a better way to put it. And they go, you'll smoke, you stop smoking, not you guys, you start smoking again. How do we make a lasting change? And I really think a lot of it has to do with school, and also a lot of it has to do with youth leadership and getting you involved in leadership, not just little programs, but really becoming involved in different settings, in different ways. Have any of you had a chance at youth leadership, or had someone that said, okay, I'm going to mentor you, I'm going to show you what to do? Because that's the kind of thing that's needed.
Bridget nodded yes.
I was a bad student. Like, I was horrible. I went to school late every day, like, would miss so many tests. Like, and looking back, I don't recognize that person, because all I had to do was remove myself from that environment into a more healthy environment, and to a school that actually cared. Because it was the school, my teacher, who threw me into the political world, who got me an internship, who kind of just to help me get back like on the right path. And now I'm here. I graduated, which I didn't think I was gonna do, because I technically dropped out of school for a year. And when I tell people that, they don't believe me.
You.
They don't believe that. They don't believe that I used to smoke weed every day. They don't believe that. But that's who I was. But that's not who I am anymore.
I'm sorry you went through that, but I am thrilled to hear this story, because you are what I believe in. You are, first of all, your story teaches more than anything I can say. And the second thing is, Maria and I were talking earlier, and she was asking me, well, what's the answer? And I said, school, 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 school. But the kind of school that you found, where there was a teacher who literally helped you to change your life, who enabled you, who empowered you to do that. And let me tell you something, the greatest anti-violence public safety strategy has to do with schools that care and teachers that care. Because that's also, Marcus, thinking about you, that's what builds the community. That's what is so profound. And Bridget, I'm so glad you told that story. And I'm so glad this is who you are, because you were always that person. It just took a teacher and a good school to bring it out of you.
You know, Sarai, you mentioned something about those that were not being paid attention to or those that fall behind. So what is it in your life that allowed you to see that, and what happened with you that you made that discovery?
I think it, well, again, I didn't come from the wealthiest community, and so we didn't have a lot of resources, and especially when I would go to class, sometimes I would often struggle with my workload, and my parents couldn't afford like a tutor to be able to make sure that I was catching up on the assignments I wasn't able to do at the time. While my wealthier classmates could afford that, and so, like I said, it was kind of a self fulfilling prophecy because my parents worked all day and were very low income. So I think just like at a very young age, I was able to notice that and notice that, you know, certain people with more resources had access to even more resources. And then I guess bringing it back to the gang theme, people who are in gangs, from what I think have been able to see is they were underprivileged from the start. They weren't given a chance from the start. So again, just repeating patterns, I feel like it's what causes them to stay there.
Is that true?
Oh, absolutely. What you said is truly wise. I love what you said, sadly, which is people who have resources then get more resources. They literally have the ability, they'll do well in school, and then they'll continue to go through school. They'll go through college. They won't have to work while they're in college. They'll have connections to good jobs. One builds on top of the other. And then the other extreme, and I've seen this with gangs so often, so sadly, there are not the resources. In fact, children are born into a world that takes away from them. From time to time, I'm called to be an expert witness on death penalty cases or on death penalty appeals. And there was one case I had, I'll never forget it, and I got the file. And it was hard copies, and it was a big box came to my house. And I started to read about this person's life. And I turned to my husband and started to describe what had happened to this young man. And my husband looked at me and said, he got the death penalty the day he was born. And he didn't mean it in a way to blame that young man. What he said was, he didn't have a chance. And that's what we're talking about here. Sometimes it feels so overwhelming, and we really have to understand how complicated the picture is when people join gangs or when people even start down that pathway.
Right, right. All right, so we don't have a lot of time, but I want to actually offer an opportunity for you to either offer advice or ask advice. So Marcus, if you could offer Jorja advice, what would it be? And if you could ask for advice from Jorja, what would it be? Oh, she can give something, but what would you want her to know, and what do you want to know?
So I heard you mention earlier about the homeboys industries, and I've actually did some research on. I did research on it before we came on here, and I'd like to ask, how could people donate or get involved, and could you expand on what they do? Because I know a lot of people would be interested in what they do to help former gang members get out of the life.
I could talk all day about Homeboy. It's an amazing, amazing place. And what it has is wraparound services. It's comprehensive. So you can go there and get tattoos removed, you can see a therapist, you get job training, you can go to a yoga class. But the other part of it is the industries is exactly what the name of the agency says. There's the Homegirl Cafe where you can work, especially if you're a young woman, you can work in the cafe as a waitress, as a cook, as a behind-the-counter person. There's a gift shop. There's the Homeboy Bakery right on site where you can learn literally how to be a scratch baker. They have homeboy farmers markets where they go to these farmers markets throughout Los Angeles and sell baked goods and things from homeboy industries. The list is long. So it's a whole community people can go through, and take a wild guess how much it costs you if you go for services at homeboy industries.
5,000 maybe?
There you go. Nothing. It is all provided for free. There's no fees, no nothing.
Would someone like Marcus be able to volunteer? Would there be
Yes.
opportunities?
There are all kinds of opportunities to volunteer. One of the big things they have a homeboy school. They need tutoring. They need help doing homework together. But there's a ton of different opportunities. The homeboy website, it's homeboyindustries.org, I think. Mm-hmm. And it shows you where to sign up. You can call there. Their door is always open. It's an amazing, magical place filled with hope.
Filled with hope is a perfect way. All right, Sarai, would you offer advice or ask advice, and what would it be?
I would ask advice specifically for women who are part of gangs, because I know that they're often a group that's underlooked. So I don't know what advice you would offer to women who might be at risk of being related to a gang or joining a gang.
I think you may have been listening in on the conversation I had earlier with Maria, because we were talking about, I'm finishing a book right now about women who have been involved with gangs, who went to prison, what happens to them, what happens to their children. The big advice I have for them isn't so much for them. We need to create more mentors for young women. We need to create more programs for young women. And those young women, I would say, look for someone to help you who's not in a gang. While in the meantime, I'm working very hard to help and make sure there are programs out there. It has to be young women, and by the way, older women as well. We have to all be told to value ourselves, to not sell ourselves short, to not have children at an early age before we're ready, to really try to be in school and to learn. But I think that double message, young women must learn to value themselves and find a woman that you can hold on to as a mentor.
All right, Bridget, ask or give a little bit of advice.
I don't know. I don't think I have any advice. Or I honestly, I think it's like keep up the good work. You've been in the community for I think since like 1992, maybe even prior to that.
Before that.
Maybe. It's impressive staying in the community.
Well, we're going to offer you encouragement, Bridget, so keep up the good work. And Marcus, how delightful to have some time with you. And Sarai, you have incredible insight. All three of you are, without question, the reason this is promise in the phrase protest and promise. And Dr. Leap, it was really, really fun to spend time with you. And obviously, we all need to go to your class sometime.
You do, and thank you. And listen, all of you should come to UCLA sooner or later, okay? Speaking of school, you can come find me there. Thank you guys so much.
All right.
Thank you.
Thank you. And that's a wrap on this Protest and Promise.